with events, you're saturating someone's senses so much in a given time frame, visually, in terms of taste and what you're hearing and all of those senses. And I think for us, it's about how do you make all of those components harmonious and really come together. And I think for us, a great event is when someone can't pinpoint why it was so magical.
Yeah, what an incredible conversation with Jennifer, right, James? We were just kind of reviewing it afterwards now, like we were both we know her well, we've worked with her, we know her, we know how good she is. But listening to her talk like this, you realize the master level of this. The attention to detail, but the nuance, the way she thinks of an event. And again, we've seen her work like this, so it's really quite remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah, it's funny how you can experience it on the day and go, yeah, I know this is going really well, right? And it's the team and all these things, but then you sit and listen to her and talk about how she's thinking and everything that goes on in the background, and you realize like, oh, yeah, like they've planned this. It's not like they haven't just planned this; they've planned this every single detail. I mean, you'll hear her talk about how they actually make the trip that the guests are going to make, and to understand and to find out, are they going to be tired? Are they going to have the right energy to be able to bring that energy to this event? That's a level of detail and planning that I think few are doing.
Yeah, and then we hear this often at events and passing by with guests, right? Somebody standing there taking it all in, going, "It's just magical, isn't it?" Almost like giving credit to some, and I go, "This is why it's magical, because of people like this who are sitting there pulling like 1,000 strings and have listened to 1,000 thoughts and balanced them all and brought them together, and now it's just quiet and calm. And you're like, oh look,
yeah."
It's mastery.
No, it's like one of weaving a tapestry, right? You stand in front of a tapestry on a wall and look at this beautiful art, this beautiful scene, and realize though there's literally hundreds of thousands of strings put into that in order to create that, and that's what we were experiencing here. She's a master at this. So this is a great call. This is a great conversation, and I think you're going to learn a lot.
Welcome everybody to today's episode of the Business of Luxury Weddings podcast. Well, how lucky are we? We have the incredible Jennifer Zabinski from JZ Events. Jennifer, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I mean, we've had the privilege of working with you for a little while now, and wow, what a privilege.
It's been fun. You make my job easier, which I love.
Well, where are you right now, Jennifer? Are you at home in New York?
I'm in New York City today. Enjoying 1 week at the office, which is a luxury.
Along those lines, tell us how many events does JZ Events do every year? I'm curious.
I would say a dozen to 15, and that really depends on where we are in the world, because if we're doing a lot of different destinations, that precludes us from taking on more work in the same month. And so we really pride ourselves on giving our clients the level of service that we're known for, which means that pre and post events, I also need to give my team the ability to gear up for the event and then recover from the event as well.
Yeah, because you guys do some proper events. They're proper. Jennifer, yes. I'm curious, what is your background here? How did you end up in this events world?
I originally went to college for hotel management, and my first job out of school was working in San Francisco, and I was a catering sales manager was my first job. And I was very fortunate to do events. We didn't have a ballroom, so we were connected to the old Federal Reserve Bank building in San Francisco. And so we were able to do these off-premise events, but still have it in-house in a way, which was great. And that was the start of my love affair with events. And it was great because I got to see everything from weddings to being the host hotel for Masters of Wine and working with very prominent vineyards and comparing California Bordeaux to French Bordeaux. So really got a huge education in terms of the whole wine world as well.
I mean, how many years then of that before you launched on your own thing? What was the...
I had a little bit of a wild ride. I did that for 4 years and lived in California for 4 years, and then came back to New York and got out of the industry and sold advertising space for magazines when people still read magazines. That's how old I am. And as I said, I worked for business magazines such as Inc. magazine, as well as Smart Money, sold to non-endemic categories. So I sold luxury, which was always my background, even with events. And what I missed was just the personal connection. As much as I was selling and servicing my clients and coming up with great marketing added value, I missed that personal connection to the event world that I had. So then started a business in New York, and I'm going on my 24th year of being in the events world. And it's a much different landscape than it was 24 years ago.
Wow. Hasn't it changed? Isn't it crazy? I love that.
It's amazing. It definitely was. There were a handful of us, and now I can't even count how many planners there are.
Yeah,
many hands full.
Yeah,
for sure. You said you immediately loved events. What is it about events that you love so much?
Well, I'm very restless as a person and get bored easily. And what I love about events, there's a start and there's a stop. And I think a lot of careers, you're kind of just sitting in, consistent roles, but you really can't see, reap the rewards of your success or see your efforts really materialize. And I think with the event world, you do have this start and stop, beginning and end, which I think maximizes creativity and output. And, just once you get bored with something, it's done, and then you're on to the next new event. And so I feel like for someone like myself, I love to see my efforts come to fruition, and then I like to move on to the next challenge. So for me, a glutton for punishment, I think.
Well, as I hear you say that, I think I never really thought of it this way, but it's such a iterative process. Like, this is how we learn anyhow, right? Is by doing something, trying it, and having an end to see, did that succeed or not? And obviously you're in business for 24 years. You definitely are succeeding at each event.
Thank you.
It gives us the ability to learn quickly when you have to do it over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. And what makes it repetitive also in the event world, it also makes it different because each client, and I think that's something that I always like to say in terms of the types of events that we do in the social market, each client is different. Sometimes with corporate, it's a little bit more objective driven, and this is more emotionally driven, which brings nuances to it, but it really does make each client, and that's what we try to really embrace who our clients are and bring them to life for their event. Because again, if it's just the same routine and the same vendors and same, pressing play, to me, the event falls flat, because our goal is to bring our clients to life and make their energy and who they are as people, as a couple, present at their event. So we really spend a lot of time getting to know our clients, what they love to do, where they love to shop and eat and travel to, because the guests that are in that space recognize if the event has authenticity or not. And so our goal, I think a successful event is when it's authentic to who you're celebrating.
Yeah. And you think especially so at the luxury level where people are used to events, it's like bringing that authenticity back into it. In the middle market, main market, you have a wedding, that's a big event in the calendar. It's rare every couple of years. I think in the luxury space, people are hosting. They're having this all the time. And so they're looking for more than just an event now, right? Because the event is not the thing.
Right. and they're hard to impress, and so I think that you can throw a lot of money at something and it still fall flat. And so we try to make where they're spending money or how they're entertaining feel like an elevated extension of how they would host in their own home. And so it's really bringing that energy into the space that they're in. And yes, you can throw in the latest and greatest immersive entertainment piece, but you also need to know who you're entertaining, because some of those things, again, won't resonate with a certain crowd. So it's really about, I always say the eye needs a place to rest sometime for it to be able to take on the next thing that it sees. And I think with events, you're saturating someone's senses so much in a given time frame, visually, in terms of taste and what you're hearing and all of those senses. And I think for us, it's about how do you make all of those components harmonious and really come together. And I think for us, a great event is when someone can't pinpoint why it was so magical, because it's really about, if one thing's screaming in the room, the other falls flat. And so it's really about creating that sense of balance and harmony with what we're creating.
I got to say, like hearing you explain it like that and having worked with you, I have to say bravo, because that's exactly it. Your events are big, so there's lots going on, but there's always this sense of calm, like space around everything. Like your team is there, you're there. Again, lots going on, but there's never like a go, 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 go. It's never like that, right, James? And I think about it in my head and I'm like, that's exactly what she's like. That's wonderful.
Yeah,
well, thank you.
Yeah, so you are good at it. You're really good at it.
Well, we don't like to create chaos. There's enough of that. And I think that inherently there will be things that are chaotic. But I think there is a sense of like calm. And every timeline that we do and every event that we create, I spend hours walking that event in my mind as a guest. And so if there are any lulls or there are any, that it feels oversaturated, I want to take it in as a guest first. And I always say to couples when they're, thinking about a location of where to get married, and they're like, okay, it doesn't matter that it's a 3-hour drive after a 6-hour plane ride, after, 20 minutes of this and 40 minutes of that. I would say, let's go and do this exact trip and then get dressed and get ready to go out for an entire night. Would you feel tired? Would you feel, energized? And I think if you feel tired, or, when we're planning something, the energy is, it's just hard to get to someplace and you've kind of exhausted them before they get out of their hotel room, that's not necessarily the best format for success. And so how do you build in downtime, or how do you pace the events and make them read differently each and every event that you're hosting, because your guests kind of need like that time to get acclimated and then get ready to party. And then usually the first night people party a little too much. So building in a little recovery for the next day and then not exhausting them that day before the wedding. And so, there are some things, where there needs to be crescendos, but there also needs to be built-in lulls as well.
Well, and the fact that you have thought through this event from the perspective of just the travel from a guest, I'm starting to see, as Otto was saying, I understand why your events feel the way they do, is because all of these things you've thought and turned over every stone to make sure, like, oh, people are going to bring the energy. Like, I never even thought about that. Yeah, that's a big deal.
If something's awkward, when you're walking it in your mind as a guest, you then take that awkward pause or that awkward moment and times it by 200 people. Well, that's a very awkward moment then, so you kind of have to, how do you put in a buffer or something to make it less of, a time suck or something that, too many transitions. So what can you build in to kind of rein it back to build it back up.
I love that.
Without giving away the Jay-Z secret sauce, if you will, can you walk through, like, how do you talked
Mine's
earlier?
hot sauce. Spicy.
You talked earlier about like trying to understand the client's vision, like who they are as people, et cetera. And you talked a little bit about that. Do you have a specific process? How do you go about understanding your client's vision and who they are?
We ask a lot of questions, I think, on the onset, and I listen a lot, because sometimes people knee jerk and say, I don't like this, or I don't want this. And trying to understand the why if someone wants something or they don't want something so strongly helps me get into their head a little bit. And so sometimes it's, people say, I don't like dancing between courses, or, like they have very specific things that they come out like, I don't like it. And I'm like, but why? Or what was the energy that was created? Or what did it make you feel? And so you kind of have to put on your, therapist hat many times to kind of understand what the underlying feeling is and what it evokes in them. And so getting to understand that helps us plan. I could sit and I could have multiple voices, the mother of the bride, the mother of the groom, the groom. And you have a lot of different opinions. And so understanding what is driving everyone's opinion helps me come up with a solution that ultimately we can come up to a compromise where it feels like someone's not giving in so much. So answering and having them answer these questions and probing more the why helps us come up with a way that we can find a solution for different components. And so it's really about listening as much as it is asking the questions.
Yeah. That's really the thing, isn't it? Listening. That's the biggest skill across the board in life. Really, it is. Keeps coming up for me for sure.
Yeah. And you need to build a level of trust, with your clients. And I think that comes so many, just being available and accessible and professional and really non-emotional, because I think there's a lot of emotion that's sometimes there, and just really bringing it back to kind of the basics of relationships and how to, again, be that sounding board for everyone, but being solution driven is something that we really love to talk about and, our approach.
How did you learn that? I mean, I'm not listening, but like I hear you saying, like putting on a therapist out. You're dealing with a lot of different personalities and emotions. And how did you learn that? Is that just purely experience, or is there something that you've done that? I guess I'm just thinking of. You said there's thousands and thousands of wedding planners, but there's a wedding planner out there right now listening to this, going, "Yeah, I really struggle with that. Like, how do I learn how to do that?"
I think, always coming from a place, like if someone's behaving in a way that's not necessarily the best, or you're not getting answers, I always say there is a reason, and everyone has host and hostess anxiety, and how it manifests itself in people is different from one to the next. And so trying to understand where it's coming from and not taking it personally, you kind of then need to listen to what they're saying and drill down on, drill the emotion out of it and kind of get to the nuts and bolts of what's giving them anxiety and how to make it feel right to them. I always say, like, even with photographers, I always say to people, you want your band to play good music. You're not hanging out and having drinks with your band leader, or maybe you are, but it's not so important. With your photographer, they're around you, in your most vulnerable moments, in your most highly stressed moments. And beautiful photos come from people when they look relaxed and at ease. And so you really need to love their work, obviously, but their energy needs to really put you in a state of peace and feeling like, okay, because no one, even the most professional model loves to get their photograph taken all the time. And so how are you going to, what personality is going to make you feel beautiful inside and out and at peace and relaxed? And so for me, it's about, I always say interview a male and a female, look at someone who might have the best portfolio, might have a personality that will overwhelm you on the day. And, I always say it's not, and, I always say that video has to follow photo's lead, but it can't be a sense like you need some breath and space between photo, video, and the bride and the groom. Like it's all too much to take in. And so building in those moments to give them a little pause or having a personality that's going to be the right fit for the couple. Again, it's nothing about their quality of work. It's just who's the right fit. And so again, asking all of these questions and listening and understanding where their hostess or host anxiety comes from allows me to put forth vendors that I feel are right for them.
Yeah. I want to just pause with something that you said I think is really important. You said video should follow photo, right? So just for all the videographers that's watching, like Jennifer Zabinski said, that's how it goes. So back off, yeah?
Yeah, I just think I do feel that it's important again, and it's a dance. You know what I mean? I even think with photographers, the two of you, your body language needs to be in sync because it is a play that's unfolding and quite quickly. It's not like shooting, an object in a studio that you just keep repositioning and shooting in this controlled environment. There are lots of things that happen. And so just having that level of energy, because I said, if everyone's front for the bride and groom or the families, it becomes a little bit claustrophobic. And I've seen people melt down about it. And so it's really my role. And, I'm always by your side, like with the photo list and things like that, to just move it along and make people feel comfortable. And I think a great energy with video and photo is, okay, photos caught everything that they need to. Video then steps in and steps up front and then redo something, and it just works. But if you're doing it all at once, it's overwhelming, and probably both is not getting the best of it. You know what I mean? So it's just about that dance.
No. I'm joking with him. It's an age-old, the photo, video. I'm just messing with my videographer friends out there. But I can hear all of that, the importance of who you pick as your team, because you're taking your mind, getting all this information from the client, you're listening, and then you're putting all of this nuance into the event and into the design. And if a photographer comes in, they don't have that same sensitivity. It's bull in a china shop. It's just like, flash, 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 flash. I shot my wedding. It's like, yeah, but you missed the feeling. And that was the point at this level. It was never just the event. It was the experience, right? And hear
it's
you.
Just humanly impossible for the bride and groom to take it all in on the day of the wedding. Like there's too much emotion. There's too much, going on. And so that's why, photo. And I always encourage people for video, because it's as beautiful as photography is. It's sometimes hearing people's voices that really bring you back, like people who are not going to be with you forever, and to hear their laughter or, just their like little, I remember for my video, just like hearing my husband like breathe in because he was so nervous. Like, it was funny. It's, it brings you to a place where you can't be on the day. And so it's so important that you're documenting that. And as much as the beauty shots are great, it's also about creating that energy and capturing all of that you put so much hard work into creating. It's about telling that story from start to finish.
I want to push into what you were saying about maybe the skill set of photographer, videographer. Obviously, after 24 years of experience watching this play unfold over and over and over again, what if you had to consult with a photographer, what are some of the skills, or what are some of the things you would say, hey, you need to make sure you are able to do X, Y, and Z, and make sure you don't do this? What are those things that you're recognizing? That's a great skill to have as a photographer. I wish they wouldn't do that.
Recognizing when someone needs a break, I think, is super important. And like when you're losing someone, just walking away from it for a bit, because I think that you're not going to get the best working efficiently, with family photos, because again, that's where everyone melts down. So being quick and organized. So giving people a rest when they need, being efficient, and giving, reading body language, I think, is so important as someone who's documenting. And I think you can come in with a vision in mind, or her Instagram visions and all of that good stuff. But it's about reading the moment and giving them a little bit of space, I think, is super important. And I think that right now, as much as all of the details are you want to capture, I think allowing to capture kind of the non-moments are some of the best shots. And so the candids and the people that make so much of the energy, I think, is so important. Recently, I've been speaking to a lot of photographers, and I would say mostly in Europe, that just cover the bride and the groom. Like they're really not focused on capturing anything else. Like they're like, we don't capture the people, we don't capture the details, we just follow the bride and groom. And I think that that's great when you're looking in isolation on Instagram and see these like glam shots. But I also think you're losing unless you have the budget to hire multiple photography teams. And again, that has a pro and con to it as well, because you don't want it to be like paparazzi and it's just a lot going on. But I think that I'd rather see, if you wanted those beautiful photos, build it into another day after the wedding, where you do kind of that portraiture work that takes so much time, versus on the day that's going to take you away. It's a 6-hour day most times in terms of cocktail ceremony, dinner and dancing, maybe after party. But if you're not available to your guests, you're missing so much. And so if you're off taking photos just of the two of you, you miss so much of your day. I always say to brides who want to change 3 times or 4 times in a day, okay, you've just lost an hour at least of your party, because even if you're, working like a runway show, it still takes time to fix your hair, your makeup, your change your shoes. It just takes you away from the guests. And I think that ultimately you miss out.
Totally.
Are you finding that you've heard of those photographers that just follow the bride and groom?
No, I actually haven't heard of it, but that kind of makes, I can see that with some work. But I think for these level events, for smaller events, I can see that working. But these level events are not just about the bride and groom, right? It's so much about the families and their communities and all of these things as well. So I see if you do that, you would miss like 70% of the event, which seems odd because it's about the couple, but we're saying it's about more than that, right? It seems like. Yeah.
Again, it's building in safety nets too, that if someone really wants that level of coverage, how can you build it out in a different day? You know what I mean? In terms of, so that you're not overwhelming, and I think if you haven't done this before, you don't realize how long of a day it is and how quickly it goes. It's like contradictory, but it is such a long day, but it goes by so quickly. And if I, had $1 for every time a bride said, "Oh my God, it's midnight already," it just feels like, it was morning. And you're like, yes, because it goes by so quickly. And that's why my job to help them focus, to be present, is so important.
I think what you said there about the ability to read the room and read people, especially at a wedding, feel the energy, that's probably the biggest skill at this level in events, I think. Like you say, to know when to back off, when to push, when to engage, like something is going on. Or maybe as a photographer, now I support the event in another way. Something has happened, and you feel that. You don't just go, "Oh my gosh, I'm hungry," or "I need my family photos now." Like, this is not about us. Like, move this thing. Our skill is we'll just move with you. And I think that's the mindset I hear you talking about.
Yeah, you need to be nimble. Like, as I always say, you could, and that's what makes, years of experience different than someone who's just starting out in this industry, regardless of what part of the industry you're in. You get to know when things are coming off the rails a bit, or reading the room or reading the situation earlier than most, and how to shift the focus for that moment to allow it to get back to where it needs to be.
No doubt. Okay, so that's all wonderful. What about the no-nos? Did I miss the no-nos? The don't do that photographer?
Oh, I just think all of the pose this way, pose that way, hold your hand here. Everyone has a ism in terms of when they're being photographed. And so I always encourage brides and grooms to do an engagement shoot. So it's not the first time they're in front of your lens is on their wedding day. And you can kind of say like, oh, stop leaning, relax your hands. They look like lobster claws right now, type of things. But you also don't want to over produce the shot, because I feel like then you lose the intimacy of what it is. As I said, it's, I've always cautioned people, oh, I have a friend who's a fashion photographer, or I have a friend who's a commercial photographer. I'm like, different energy. It's a different muscle. It's so different. Like there's that one kiss. It's the one look. It's the, it is a play that moves quickly, and you need to be skilled as a photographer to capture that. And if it's a muscle, and it's knowing when that's going to happen and anticipating that. And so sometimes I feel if a photographer is over styling or over, choreographing a shot, the energy of what was supposed to happen doesn't happen. 100%.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
I think I know what you might answer to this, but I'm curious to hear what you think. What would you say is Jennifer Zabinski's superpower? Like if you like, what makes you really good at what you do?
Well, I'm a stickler for details in terms of just like being a little bit of a perfectionist. However, I am a balanced person. And so I try to create balance with my clients as well as with the team that we assemble. And so I pride myself on being accessible to my clients, but also to the vendors that we're bringing on, so that everyone has what they need to be the most successful they can be. And so whether that's, getting you the information in a timely fashion, or, having my client give you the information, you can't be held to a shot list if you don't know that Aunt Betty is really important to them. And so just being really available. People always say, wow, you're really calm. And I'm like, oh, I would be really bad at my job if I wasn't calm. So I could be dying inside, but, you kind of have to keep your face on. And a long time ago, when I was in the hotel industry, my first general manager was a woman. And, she always told me that, like, you need to, if you're going to be the producer of something, you need to know what your producers are doing and what goes into it. So you can't give lighting input unless you understand what goes into lighting a room. And you can't give any sort of culinary direction if you don't understand food or beverage or wines. And so for me to be authentic and to be credible, you have to have the skill set to know everyone else's role and what it does. So if you're talking about backline, what that entails and what goes into it, because if you don't, then you're just a lot of air is coming out, not a lot of direction.
Yeah. You're complicating things. You're not helping, right? Yeah.
No, I had to pick one. I was going to say your ability to stay calm. I don't think I've ever heard you talk in a way that's not like you're not talking right now. I've never seen you your voice escalate or speak faster or louder. It's just always this calm confidence, which I so appreciate because, everyone's looking to you. And when they see that calmness, like, oh, everything's fine. Everything's good. I've always recognized.
As I said, you could be dying inside and like spinning around there, but it's, it's, and there are things that will happen and go, off schedule on a day. It's how do you react to it, I think is where the experience comes in. And there are certain jobs that, take more and take more knowledge of, just working in a certain location or the heat or the steps or, we do things in Capri and, just how that's going to affect the guests that the bride and groom don't know. And so like building in, a cold towel station when people come off the buses and have had to walk. It's, just bringing in, some of these levels of details that, again, no one looks at a cold towel on a dance floor, a cold towel before a ceremony as a beautiful detail shot to capture for Instagram. But when you do give a cold towel and water before, at different points of someone's reception, they're so appreciative. And it's like, wow, they thought of everything. And again, it's like, what do you do that makes your guests feel taken care of?
Yeah, but I love it because all I hear is just experience. Yeah, they talk about that 10,000 hour rule. And I tell my kids this all the time, find something and give it at least 10,000 hours. It'll reward you.
Yeah.
Now, if you give that same thing 30, 40, 50, 100,000 hours, like I listen to you talk and all these nuances, you're talking to a client and you talk so effortlessly through it, but it's because years of repetitive action and learning has created intuition that's just next level. And I love that. I love seeing it in other people. I have a great appreciation for it. It's just like a little bit of a bravo to you, like, because it's all over you. The experience, just you've done this. And
well, it's also experience, but it's also, I feel like I learned something from each event. And so being open enough to have takeaways from each event. Well, this could have been done this way or that, wow, I could have done that in a different way that would have had a different outcome. And again, not that it was right or wrong. It's just being the ability to learn and learn from others. I always say, when clients say, well, you work with, my favorite event designer, or I love to meet new creative talent out there. And it's, you learn from different people and different styles. And so for me, the ability, I think the day you stop learning is the day it's time to call it a day. And that's what, again, it's not repetitive. It's new. Every event, every couple, every client is new and has nuances that it's our job to read. So it's, it's something different every day.
I have a, maybe from the beginning of the episode, you were saying things have changed so much in the industry. I agree. Like, do you think good or bad? Mostly good for the good?
I think mostly good. I think that, there's so much quantity out there now that I think people, as a client interviewing, it's like there's such a range. So understanding what's best for that client, in terms of what they want and hiring the right person, because it's, if you're expecting a certain level for someone just starting out who does, kind of a hybrid of planning offering, they're not going to give you as much attention as someone who's doing full service. So being able, when there's such a range of spectrum, I think it's our job to educate people. Well, here's a $10,000 photographer and here's a $50,000 photographer. What is the difference? And someone can say, I like their work equally. Well, there's just, again, it's that muscle memory, it's that skill, it's that level, it's the, so I think being able to, especially in my seat, educate the clients on what goes into, different price points and different, levels of experience, what that gets you. and helping them being able to prioritize, just because something's more expensive doesn't mean it's the best fit for someone. And I truly believe that. And I kind of live my life a little high-low. And I think that events that do a little high-low have more levels of interest, just because you can throw a lot of money at something and it still fall flat. So how do you make it interesting? So I think that, and I think, social media has taken events to a different level. And it's, again, trying to explain certain things that someone sees on Instagram, what the reality is of, what that decision meant, So it's just kind of, I think, education and educating the clients is something that we really pride ourselves in doing, because, I always say I put my feet in my client's shoes, and, it's all a lot of money at the end of the day for a very special day, but sometimes a day or two. And so you want an educated client, because then ultimately they'll be happy with the decisions that they've made.
No doubt.
I hear, as I listen to you talk, I hear you talk a lot about weddings, staying in the moment of a wedding versus like focusing more on production. Do you think is that a trend for weddings, or is that a Jay-Z event intentionality behind that?
I would say that's my intentionality of it, because I think that the production is great, but it can feel overdone. And I think, trying to focus on what the event is and what the union is, especially in weddings, I think is super important to keep that energy alive. And so, I think focusing on the output is important to understand what the deliverables are, but also being in the moment to capture those deliverables is super important as well.
Yeah, because it didn't have to be an either or, right? And that's definitely the case for your events, because it's not like your events are low on production, but they feel real. An authenticity to it that I love.
Yeah. And that's something that we really, I always say, getting to know the clients and creating this sense of authenticity is super important to us, because it doesn't feel right if you're forcing something. I think that's just important. And again, having those, crescendos with a little bit of a dip to come back up again. You always want to play to, guest standing, like you kind of want to end on a high and people wanting a little bit more. So it's, again, balancing that throughout the course of these multiple day events. I think it's different when you're just doing a one-day event versus multiple days, which we end up doing so many of.
Yeah, so this has been a wonderful conversation, Jennifer. Thank you again for making the time with us. For me, it's just having worked with you before, it's just wonderful to hear your thinking behind it again, and to see all of that service level, that just awareness, I love how you talk about the event like that. There's crescendos and there's ups and downs. And I've learned an immense amount.
That's why working with you guys is such a pleasure. I always say that you're in it. I just remember that time in Mexico, you rolled your pants up and went right in the pool to capture the shot. It's just, I think it's really about creating this team, and the A team can look different for each client, but it really is about, our job is to create that team for the client, and personalities is a big part of an emotional event and a social event versus it just being a transaction.
Yeah.
I love that.